Well, it's been all over TV, so I won't spend all day on this, but it is a major event. When you have a serial murderer who's killed at least 10 people, abused them sexually, apparently tortured them, a real sicko. As an architect, what have I told you, Mr. Producer? What have I told you, America? Never trust the architects. Oh, I didn't? Well, you get the point. And so this guy's a really big pig. Rex Heuermann. And he's been charged in these 4 cases, but there's many more, of these sex workers, I guess prostitutes. They're all young women. I think they're under 25. And they've been looking for this guy for a very, very long time. And technology is an amazing thing. This guy's a big fat slob. So what does he do, Mr. Producer? He leaves pizza and pizza boxes on the side of the road, near where he murders and buries these women. And just, it's horrendous, obviously. It's fantastic police work, obviously. And it's a horrendous thing when you lose a daughter this way. First, they go into this prostitution, and then they are sexually tortured and abused and slaughtered. It's a horrible thing. And now he's arrested, and I love the defense attorney comes out and says, my client says he's innocent. Wait a minute. Are you kidding me? That's shocking. Your client says he's innocent. And not only does he say he's innocent, he is innocent. Oh. So that DNA, how did that happen? It was planted there. No doubt by a white supremacist. This guy's dead as a doornail. The problem is he's not dead as a doornail because it's New York. You don't have the death penalty anymore in New York, do you, Mr. Producer? And that's the problem with getting rid of the death penalty, in my view. That is, this guy should be put to death. Of course, he's innocent until proven guilty. I'm sitting here thinking, you realize on MSLSD and the Constipated News Network, the rest of the media in America, they actually hate Donald Trump more than they do this mass murder. Do you realize that, Mr. Producer? But that's the situation there, and we'll keep an eye on it as it develops over time. These things take a long time for defense to get their act together in each case and so forth and so on. And do keep in mind the government only has to convict on one case to get a life, cholera, to get a life sentence. I wanted to start the program off with something that's upbeat and different. No, not belly dancers. Upbeat and different. And still, I've never understood this belly dancing thing either. I mean, I don't even know. You see it on TV, people dancing around with their belly out. Is that attractive to you, Mr. Producer? No? I just like, okay, your belly, okay, whatever. Justice Scalia, on the issue of American exceptionalism to a Senate Judiciary Committee in October 2011. This is so important because I'm going to move from this into a decision by a panel on the Fifth Circuit involving the district judge's decision in Louisiana, stopping the government cold in its tracks, the government that has been involved in the greatest destruction of the First Amendment and promotion of censorship in American history. And we're going to dig into this. But first, to set the stage, you don't need me. How about the late, great Antonin Scalia? Cut 18, go.
I think it's even a little more fundamental than the one that Stephen has just put forward. I asked them, what do you think is the reason that America is such a free country? What is it in our Constitution that makes us what we are? And I guarantee you that the response I will get, and you will get this from almost any American, including the woman that he was talking to at the supermarket, the answer would be freedom of speech, freedom of the press, no unreasonable searches and seizures, no quartering of troops in hope, those marvelous provisions of the Bill of Rights. But then I tell them, if you think that a Bill of Rights is what sets us apart, you're crazy. Every banana republic in the world has a Bill of Rights. Every president for life has a Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights of the former evil empire, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, was much better than ours. I mean it literally. It was much better. We guarantee freedom of speech and of the press. Big deal. They guaranteed freedom of the speech, of the press, of street demonstrations and protests, and anyone who is caught trying to suppress criticism of the government will be called to account. Whoa, that is wonderful stuff. Of course, just words on paper. What our framers would have called a parchment guarantee. And the reason is that the real constitution of the Soviet Union, you think of the word constitution, it doesn't mean a bill, it means structure. Say a person has a sound constitution, has a sound structure. The real constitution of the Soviet Union, which is what our framers debated that whole summer in Philadelphia in 1787. They didn't talk about the Bill of Rights. That was an afterthought, wasn't it? That constitution of the Soviet Union did not prevent the centralization of power in one person or in one party. And when that happens, the game is over. The Bill of Rights is just what our framers would call a parchment guarantee.
Such a rare genius. And so well said. Now, listen to this. Cut 19, go.
Sometimes I go to Europe to talk about separation of powers. And when I get there, I find that all I'm talking about is independence of the judiciary. Because the Europeans don't even try to divide the two political powers, the two political branches, the legislature and the chief executive. In all of the parliamentary countries, the chief executive is the creature of the legislature. There's never any disagreement between them and the prime minister, as there is sometimes between you and the president. When there's a disagreement, they just kick him out. They have a no confidence vote, a new election, and they get a prime minister who agrees with the legislature. And, the Europeans look at this system and they say, well, it passes one house, it doesn't pass the other house. Sometimes the other house is in the control of a different party. It passes both, and then this president who has a veto power vetoes it, and they look at this and they say, it is gridlock. And I hear Americans saying this nowadays, and there's a lot of it going around. They talk about a dysfunctional government because there's disagreement, and the framers would have said, yes, that's exactly the way we set it up. We wanted this to be power, contradicting power, because the main ill that beset us, as Hamilton said in the Federalist, when he talked about a separate Senate. He said, yes, it seems inconvenient, but inasmuch as the main ill that besets us is an excess of legislation, it won't be so bad. This is 1787. He didn't know what an excess of legislation was. So unless Americans can appreciate that and learn to love the separation of powers, which means learning to love the gridlock, which the framers believed would be the main protection of minorities. The main protection. If a bill is about to pass that really comes down hard on some minority, they think it's terribly unfair. It doesn't take much to throw a monkey wrench into this complex system. So Americans should appreciate that, and they should learn to love the gridlock. It's there for a reason, so that the legislation that gets out will be good legislation.
Absolute genius. Now, I played that for you, not only because it's uplifting and it puts things in perspective, but out of a concern of a ruling today from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which covers Louisiana. And it covers the case of Judge Doughty. the decision of Judge Doughty that was issued last week. And he put the brakes on the most abusive violation of the First Amendment, the most abusive use of censorship by the United States government in American history, exercised by Biden and the Democrat Party. And he gave chapter and verse in his decision. He said the government has used its power to silence the opposition. Opposition to COVID-19 vaccines. Opposition to COVID-19 masking and lockdowns. Oppositions to the lab leak theory of COVID-19. Opposition to the validity of the 2020 election. Opposition to President Biden's policies. Statements that the Hunter Biden laptop story was true. And opposition to policies of government officials in power. All were suppressed. It's quite telling that each example or category of suppressed speech was conservative in nature. This targeted suppression of conservative ideas is a perfect example of viewpoint discrimination of political speech. American citizens have the right to engage in free debate about the significant issues affecting the country. The evidence produced thus far depicts an almost dystopian scenario. During the COVID-19 pandemic, it appeared perhaps best characterized by widespread doubt and uncertainty. The United States government seems to have assumed a role similar to an Orwellian ministry of truth. The plaintiffs in this case have provided substantial evidence in support of their claims that they were the victims of a far-reaching and widespread censorship campaign by their own government. And then this happens today. CBS News, a federal appeals court on Friday. It's a panel of the court. This is 2 hours ago. Temporarily paused a lower court order that limited communications between top Biden administration officials and social media companies about content posted to their platforms. The three-judge panel of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals granted the Justice Department's request to put on hold the July 4 preliminary injunction from U.S. District Judge Terry Doughty while legal proceedings continue. It also agreed to expedite the administration's appeal. It's the very administration, ladies and gentlemen, that committed act of violence against the First Amendment. Now, it is typical, not atypical, but typical for a circuit court or a panel of the court to do this sort of thing in a fairly regular case. But when you're talking about the most grave effort in American history to silence the citizenry on issue after issue after issue from one government agency to the other through social media and so forth, that's not your typical case. And Scalia pointed out, we can have the greatest constitution on the face of the earth. That's why I've provided the Soviet Constitution in 3 of my books, the relevant parts. But it's not going to matter. Because as John Adams said, liberty without virtue is tyranny. I don't know who these 3 judges are on this panel, but what they did this evening was a disgrace. I don't know what they'll ultimately do,